And with that, we've been in this series that's really kind of focused down this same road. It's been called Make Room. And really the heart of this whole series is kind of this, that we're just trying to recognize the reality of the world that we live in, that there is a lot of distraction. There's a lot going on, a lot of noise in our world. And more than ever, maybe, there's more opportunity to be distracted and to be drawn away from the things that matter most, from kind of what's going on in our hearts, in our minds, in our relationship with God. And we said we have to kind of be intentional and almost a little bit aggressive to go into our lives and say, you know what, I'm going to make room. I'm not going to just get caught up in the flow and the stream of life and just being distracted kind of constantly. I want to kind of interrupt that and create a little bit of space so that I can think and see and hear and be changed in some profound ways by Jesus. And so we've been talking about how to do that and different ways that can show up. And so if you've missed maybe the last few conversations, you can catch up online if you want to. You can do that through our YouTube channel or the website and watch those. What we want to do today, though, is really dive into a conversation about a mechanism, a tool that God has provided for us that is really a kind of built-in place to make room in our lives. And so we're going to look at that a little bit today. And I know that we come here from like all kinds of backgrounds. Some of you are like me and you have no church background at all. That's my background. I didn't grow up in church, didn't grow up in Sunday school. All of it's foreign to me. Didn't hear about any of it until I was an adult. Some of you grew up kind of exposed to different religious backgrounds. Some of you grew up in different faiths. Some of you grew up in the church. And so some of this may be familiar language for you if you grew up in the church. And here's what I want to encourage you to do. Maybe push pause on whatever you've heard before about this conversation we're going to have. We're going to talk about the Sabbath today. If you've heard teaching about that, maybe just pause what you've heard and attempt to see it with fresh eyes today. Because we're going to look at what the Sabbath is, why it's given to us as a gift, and kind of how this all works. And here's kind of the background of it as we look at how we tend to live. This is kind of how I think of it, and maybe it's just how I live, and maybe you'll see yourself in it a little bit. But here's kind of how I tend to think of it, that as life goes on, we tend to work a lot, right? We tend to work a lot. And as we work a lot, we think of rest, and the rhythm of work and rest for us looks kind of like this, that we work, we do our paid work or our school work or whatever it is that's kind of our core activity for work right now in our stage of life. And then what will happen is we'll take a day off here or there, and then we'll go do often our personal work. We'll go shopping, and we'll go to the bank, and we'll do the things or whatever you do, right? Or and in between some of those, we'll entertain ourselves a lot often, So entertainment and work and right and we kind of survive our lives, and then we hope to make it to vacation one day, right? And this is, at least I've done this a bunch, so I have very personal experience here. So you're working, and along the way you're thinking, it's okay that I'm just working all the time. I've got vacation coming. And sometimes that vacation is like a month away. Sometimes it's 3 months away. Sometimes it's like a year away, and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make it, right? And we'll kind of live in this kind of constant state of working / numbing ourselves or entertaining ourselves to kind of get by. And often what will happen to me when I have lived in these rhythms is on my way to vacation, what would happen is either I would get to vacation and I would crash at vacation. So I would get there and I would show up at vacation exhausted, and that's when the tension would finally show up, and we would have an argument, and right, because we have been waiting and placing so much hope on what this vacation could give us that there's kind of a crash at the end. Or sometimes what would happen is the crash would happen before, and I'd get sick, right, or kind of be like, I just can't keep going. I've got to take a break in between. And this way of working, I think we recognize it. There's something like not quite right about it. It just doesn't quite cut it. Because here's partly why. At least this is how it's worked for me. Is along the way in this spectrum, as I'm living week after week after week, I'm kind of losing ground. I'm losing energy, losing focus, kind of losing it, right? On the way to vacation. And we're kind of, our tanks are getting hardcore drained along the way. That's why we hit a crash, or that's why we get to vacation and crash again. But especially as there's more and more distractions, that sense of work kind of never turns off because it's in our pocket, it's in the screen, right? It's all the time. The question is there another way that this could look, right? Is there a different paradigm that this might show up in? And here's really the way that God designed this to look, is that there would be periods of work, 6 days, and then there would be an interruption, a purposeful, intentional interruption to that work. And then here there would be rest. And then there would be 6 days work, and then there'd be rest, right? And over and over again. And it's not that there's not a need for vacation down here somewhere, but in this rhythm, the hope is that if I actually pushed all of my work into these 6 days and actually rested here, that maybe I could go back, and when I went back and attacked my work and approached my work again, that I could go back to it a little bit differently, that I could go back more refreshed, more energized, and that hopefully I could kind of hold that line a little bit better, maybe lose a little bit of ground in heavy work seasons like we all have, but I'm not sinking. I'm not falling into the abyss of being emotionally and mentally exhausted, physically sick, right? That's the hope, right? Not that those things are always going to happen eventually at some point, but this rhythm might be much, much healthier. This is kind of the way that God set it up. And as we talk about this, I want us to see, super important, if we're going to talk about the Sabbath and what it looks like, what does it mean to rest? What is the Sabbath? How does it work? We want to break some of that down today. And just to warn you, I'm just going to give us kind of a start here. I'm going to open up a high-level conversation, and you have to kind of get into it and start playing with it and working with it. But before it's going to make, I think, more sense, and you can go super, super deep if you want to. But here's the idea. The idea of the Sabbath is just this. It's just a 24-hour period where I am not working, where I'm resting, right? And you're like, Ryan, what does rest mean? Right? What do you mean by that? Does that mean that I just sit in a chair and stare at a wall for 24 hours? I hate this, I'm leaving, right? And I get that, but I would feel that way too. That's not quite it. We're going to break it down and look at it a little bit. But the idea of Sabbath was introduced because God worked for 6 days in creation and he rested on the seventh. And then he looks at us and he says, listen, in essence, I want you to do the same thing. And there's a reason for that. And that reason is super important. We're going to see this in a little bit. But I want us to begin to understand the Sabbath, which started really as a law for the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, as God was governing them in the Old Testament. It was a law given to God's people to obey. And then when Jesus came, our relationship with that law changed. Here's what the Apostle Paul would say. Colossians 2:16-17 says, therefore, don't let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration or a Sabbath day. It says these are a shadow of the things that were to come. The reality, however, is found in Christ. So the Bible is going to say, hey, this Sabbath day thing, we're not going to judge each other and look at each other and treat each other like this is a law. So, right, I don't want you to get stressed out and ask all these questions about what exactly does it mean and how am I going to do it wrong? If I do it wrong, is somebody going to throw stones at me like in the Old Testament? Now, that's going to happen. Don't worry, right? That's not the idea at all. Uh, that's how it worked in some ways in the Old Testament. Jesus would change that. He fulfilled the law, and now we live by the law of love. However, there is some incredible benefits to this rhythm of work and rest. In fact, this is what Jesus would say. He says, the Sabbath was made for man. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man, Jesus, the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath, right? It's in the midst of a conversation, but Jesus makes this point that the Sabbath, this thing right here, was given for us. And here's why. We're not super good at recognizing our need to sit down and take a rest. I'm not good at it. You're probably not good at it. We're not good at it, right? Our kids aren't good at it. It's why I look at my kids and they need a bedtime, right? Your kid, if you have kids, they need a bedtime. My kids, if I didn't give them a bedtime, they would stay up forever. I mean, they would stay up until they absolutely passed out and crashed, and they would have a terrible day the next day, right? And that would happen. And if I let them just eat whatever they want, they would just eat candy, right? And that would be awful, right? If we don't on our own have some limits and some tools given to us, then we will just run until we crash, until we break. And I don't want to admit that I'm tired. I don't want to admit that I should probably sit down and take a rest. I want to keep going. I want to keep doing my work. I don't want to stop, and you don't either. However, God knows us. He knows where He created us. He knows that we are creatures, that we need about a third of our hours need to be spent sleeping, that if I don't eat something, I get cranky, right? We have to take care of ourselves because we are people. We are creatures. We are human. We have limits and we have needs. So this idea of the Sabbath, here's your takeaway, right? I want to make sure we capture this. This idea of the Sabbath is this. It's not a law to be kept. It's a gift to be enjoyed. The Sabbath is not a law to be kept. It's a gift to be enjoyed. Right? So this conversation is not about how we all need to keep the Sabbath, and if you don't, you're wrong and you're in trouble. This conversation is about the gift of what God the Father gave to us that we might find refreshment and energy and peace and rejuvenation, that we might interact with God in the ways that He designed for us, and then ask the question, would that actually change, if I did that, would that actually change how I go back and live the rest of my life? And could that make my life a little more sustainable? Would more joy show up like this? Would more peace show up if I live like this? Could the Sabbath and the idea of the Sabbath be a gift to me, a gift to be enjoyed? Right? So that's the question. And what I want to do is I want to break this down, and we're going to just look at this again from a really high level, and we're going to look at 3 words that define this, because I want to put some skin on it and make it as practical as we can get it today. Here's going to be the first one. We're going to start here. A huge part of what this day is about is this word right here, delight. Delight. What this day can be about is delighting in the gifts that God has given to us, often that we have a hard time seeing or making room to enjoy. Look at this verse, James 1:17. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. We want to see God, right? It's very typical for all of us because we have failed God. It's typical for us to think of God as angry with us, as mad at us, as waiting for us to screw it up again, right? As waiting to punish us. It's harder for us to think of God as someone who loves us, who is for us, who is eager to forgive, who knows what we did, and intentionally sent Jesus to take care of what we did. That's what He was doing on the cross. And then he, like a good father, wants to actually give us good gifts. And He's doing it all the time. He's doing it all the time. It's hard to see that. It's hard to see the reality of that. But that's exactly what's happening. And in Sabbath, I can tap into and see that reality more clearly. So you say, Ryan, what are you talking about when you're talking about delight? Let's put a little bit of skin on it. Here's what we're talking about. We want to take a little time to delight in relationships. Delight in relationships. So for all of us here, right, there are key relationships in our lives that just matter a ton. There are some people, friends or a spouse or kids, or mom and dad, I don't know, right, who it is, but somebody in your life matters a lot. And maybe there's a couple somebodies in your life that matter a lot. And when you spend time with those people, you walk away kind of filled up with energy, remembering more of who you are, right? You're like, this was awesome. Investing into that relationship, enjoying that relationship, actually is a phenomenal use of time. And when I do that, it's awesome, right? Spending time to enjoy the gift of those relationships is huge. It's a huge thing. So if you're married, maybe there's a date that goes in here. Maybe it's grabbing a little time with a friend every once in a while on one of these. Delighting in the key people. If you have a young family, just creating space for you just to be together. Right? Just be together. Not to zone out and just watch TV, but actually to eat a meal together. I've got 3 daughters, right? So I've got 4 kids. Literally sitting at a table and coloring with my daughters. It's fantastic. It's actually super stress relieving. I'm coloring and I love it, right? It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it's just right. It's the reality. I'm like, it's fantastic. Go get some Crayolas. They're awesome. Okay, right? So delight. It's good. Right, here's another one. Delight in creation. Man, I love this one. Right, Scripture says that the heavens declare the glory of God. All you got to do is look around at the stuff God made, take a little minute to kind of see it with fresh eyes, and you look at a sunset or a massive tree or be outside in God's creation, and you're once again blown away that God made this stuff. You can see it. Who has the power and the creativity and the ingenious mind to create this? When I'm in busy land, I don't see it. I just got to get to the next red light. I got to make it to work. I got to answer that next text. I got to look at Facebook again. Now, because there's a red dot on my phone, right? Dude, there's a star. You know what I mean? You ever just stop and just see, oh, wow, there it is. Delighting in creation, it pushes us into a little reset moment where I can find not numbness, not entertainment, where I can find awe. You want to know what puts fuel in your tank? Awe. And it's easy to mock. It's easy to make fun of things. It's easy to go fast. It's hard to go slow. It's hard to be filled with awe. It takes a little more energy. It's awkward. I'm exposing myself to being made fun of, right? To feeling foolish. But when I get there, what happens in that space, that transition, is I walk away different when I experience a little bit of awe. I know you do. You do it, I do it, we all do it. That's why I love going to the woods, right? I know not all of you are woods people. I'm a woods person. I love it. I had a tree fall in my yard this week. It knocked out a power line. I was pumped. You know why? I was like, this is fantastic. I get to use my chainsaw to be outside. I got poison ivy, but that's another thing, right? But I love just being out in it. Because partially I get to see his nature by the stuff he made and can enjoy and delight in it. Here's the next one. Delight in refreshment. Delight in refreshment. Here's a question that I would love for you to write. If you're taking notes, write this down. What refreshes me? Have you ever answered that question before? What actually refreshes me? When I do this, when I hang out with this person, when I do this activity, I actually leave that little investment of time more energized to go face my life, more grateful, more filled with joy. It was probably less than 6 months ago, I sat down and did this, and I was like, I don't think I've ever actually thought about this question before. It's a little embarrassing. Well, what refreshes me? And you might have to experiment with this one a little bit, right? Because it's going to be different for different people. Some of you are like, man, I just listening to music and sitting in my room, or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, awesome. Some of you are going to say, yeah, going out on a hike in the woods, love it. Some of you are like, man, I need to go like tinker with an engine and do something with my hands. Awesome. What is it that makes you feel refreshment? Feels like a question we should know the answer to. Want to do that? Now, if we did some of those things, they don't all have to happen every time on the Sabbath, right? And this day of the week can be whatever we really pick. I got to make some space to do some of this. I got to make room, right? And in order to do that, I got to do the next word. I got to rest, right? I got to rest. I got to stop. And there's really two words in the Hebrew scriptures for rest. One is the idea of ceasing, stopping. I got to put the brakes on the thing. I got to stop. Stop working. Stop striving. Stop. The other piece of it is the idea of dwelling. I stop, and then I dwell. I live in the rest that comes with knowing God. This is the reality, is that it's only really in Jesus that real rest is found. Because this isn't just about doing some stuff I like to do. These are gifts given to us by a God who loves us. And I find rest in him. And by faith, I'm doing this Sabbath thing because I believe that's actually the most restful thing that I could do with myself, is to be with Jesus in the gifts that he's given to me. But I gotta actually put the brakes on to do it. So Ryan, what does that look like? Here's a couple ways that could look. I want to be still, and I want to know that he is God. Right? I want to cease, and I want to dwell. Here's the idea. I want to rest from paid work. As much as I can, and I realize, even as I'm saying this right now, some of you are like, Ryan, I'm a single parent. Ryan, I got 5 jobs. Ryan, I'm in school full-time and in work full-time. I get that this is complicated, right? So stay with me. We'll get there. Here's the ideal. We'll look at the ideal. Don't excuse it yet. We'll help you get started wherever you are. But ideally, I'm going to rest from paid work. Then I'm going to say, you know what? On this day, I'm not going to take a shift. On this day, I'm not going to answer emails. This day, I'm not going to be as much as I can. Maybe emergencies are. Right? I'm going to not engage in paid work. I'm going to try to press all of that into these 6 days before to make room. Here's the other idea. I'm going to rest from personal work. I'm going to try to get the shopping done in the 6 days before. I'm going to try to get the errands done, the stuff that has to be done. I'm going to try to do all of that early so that I have some room made here where I can actually delight, right? And I can get some real rest at the deepest level. Rest from personal work. Now, I realize that for some of us, personal work and delight can have some overlap, and it looks different for everybody. Some of us work with our hands, and so when we go home and do a house project on the house, it's exhausting. because I do this work all the time, and then I'm going to go do that same work at home. It's just a to-do list. Sometimes because I work a lot with my brain, and things are never totally complete, it's sometimes really relaxing for me to go work with my hands. Sometimes that's refreshing. You know, a fence gets built, and it just stays built. It's beautiful. You should look at that. It's done. It's wonderful, right? And flip side might be true. You might want to do some intellectual things that are walk away refreshed to read and to study. Okay? And it might look different to say, you know what, this is actually delight for me. And here's the key differentiator between them. Here it is. If it's something I have to do, don't do it. If it's something I really want to do, and I can answer the question that it is going to refresh me, do it. Simple. Okay, and guys, listen. Don't go crazy with this thing. Just do your best. Start somewhere. That's the idea. Right? As much as we can, we're going to rest from personal work. Here's the last one. Rest from the burdens of life. Part of this is an act of faith that says this: God, I believe that you are working when I'm not. Well, if I don't do this, if I don't keep driving it, it's not going to happen. Well, if I don't, right, we all get into that. If I don't keep moving it, it won't move. And maybe there's a small side of that has some truth to it. And there's a really big God who's able to do far more than I can ask, think, or imagine. And when I stop, I confess that. God, you are able to care for things, and you are able to keep moving things even when I sit still. I believe that. That somehow you will keep the world spinning while I sit down. There's an act of humility in that, and it sounds funny, but we kind of struggle with it. Me too. I start believing that if I don't spin the world, it will stop spinning and fall off of the axis. Right? And we get a little bit delusional. Right? So here's the idea. I want to rest so I can delight. So I can delight. And then in all of this, I give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Psalm 119, look at that whole psalm. It's beautiful. In all of these things, what I'm really looking for is I'm looking to reflect on the goodness of God, on who God is, and in these ways, right? When I stop and I enjoy, what I'm able to walk away and see is more clearly I'm able to see who God is. You're like, Ryan, what are we looking for here when we reflect? Here's some of the idea. Reflect on God's goodness. Reflect on God's goodness. There are countless ways that God is being good to us right now. Right now. Ways that I blaze past in a given day. Ways that he has protected. Ways that he has sustained. Ways that he has put people into my path. His goodness is actually overwhelming. But when I am speeding up, right? You ever ride a bike down a hill really fast? And you start to get going really, 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 really quick. You think, like, if I hit one rock, I'm toast, right? That's how I feel when I live over here. When I'm going that fast down the hill and the bike's shaking a little bit, it's really hard to see the goodness of God because I feel like it's all just going to snap. And if I don't just keep going and keep accelerating, this thing's going to... When I stop, I'm able to see who God is again. Man, Lord, you've look how far you've taken me. Look at what you've done. You sustain all of these creatures. You bring the sun up and down every day. You put oxygen in my lungs. The goodness is everywhere. Now listen, I know there's painful things. That's real. And there's incredible goodness all around us. We want to reflect on God's provision. God, it's you. It's you who put a roof over my head. Deuteronomy says, right, God, you have given us the ability to create wealth. It's you who've given skills and opportunities to have a job. You provided those things so that we might be provided for. And it's you who feeds us and cares for us. What happens when we stop and look at that? Worship happens. It's you who provided the spouse for me that I have. It's you who gave the gift of friendship. I start to see it more and more clearly. I start to reflect on the wonder of God. And here's how I know I'm kind of doing it well or doing it right. This is what I've been practicing and playing with lately. A friend really inspired me around this. I try to sit somewhere and look at God's creation. Look out a window. When it's summertime, I would sit right on my porch and just look at some trees and look at what God had made until I started to feel, this is going to be interesting for all of us, until I started to feel a little bit bored. Do you remember the last time you've been truly bored? It's actually hard. It's really hard to be bored. What happens when you feel bored? I'll tell you what happens when I feel bored. I do this. When I feel bored, I go like this. Give me my phone. Right? I'm in line. I mean, and you sit in a chair, I don't know, 3 minutes. You're like, I've been here all day, man. It's a long time. It's awkward. I just want to get us into this picture. There's a little set of decisions that has to happen where I have to choose to embrace that awkwardness. Go give awkward a big hug. Okay? It's the idea. I got to embrace the awkwardness. This moment is uncomfortable. I feel a little unsettled, and then what happens is I settle into it a little bit, and then I can start to relax and start to see. And then worship comes out. You're stopping to eat some good food and eat a good meal on your Sabbath in delight. Do you know that eating is an act of worship? It can be. God, you're the one who gave me taste buds. You could have made this thing super boring. You're the one who invented that. That a couple times a day I get to do this. What an awesome gift. Instead of slamming down a meal so I can go work some more. Totally different experience, right? Totally different. I do both regularly, right? But two totally different things. Right? We get to be a human being here, not just a human doing. I get to be and see that what God has made and how he's provided. Here's the last one. Reflect on God's grace. Taking a little time to look at the scriptures or to pray or even just to think about what God has done to sustain me and to forgive me. God, not only are you choosing to not separate yourself from me forever in eternity, you're also choosing to allow me to be with you in eternal bliss forever in eternity. Not only am I not getting what I deserve, but I'm enjoying an abundance that is far beyond what any of us could ever earn. Your grace, it's undeserved, it's overwhelming, it's overflowing. Guys, if we did some version of that, if we did 50%, if we did 20% of that, one day a week, here's a question. Do you think it would change how the rest of the week went? Might I be able to carry more of my relationship with Jesus into that week? Might I walk with more gratitude into that week? Might there be more awe and rest and less stress in that week? Game changer. Game changer. This is a game-changing structure. That's why God's giving it to us. It's for you. This isn't about if you picked up twigs or not on the Sabbath and if you broke it. This is a gift. This is for you. I love you. You need this. I need it. Say, Ryan, where do we start, man? Where do we start with this? It's pretty overwhelming. And I know all of us have mounting excuses about why this isn't going to totally work in our lives. I'm super busy and you don't know, and I got roommates. Or Here's the thing. Wherever you are, make a decision to start somewhere. Start somewhere. Right? I realize for some of us, we've got a situation where we take a regular day off, and we simply just need to implement a version of this and start to try it. You can make it work in a 24-hour period. A bunch of us have more complexities in our world. It's not that clean. It's all broken up. Here's the ask, right? Here's the challenge. Can I find something to work with? Can you find 2 hours? Can you find 4? Can you find 6? What if you started with a half day? Right? What if you have to schedule it differently every week? Who cares? It's not about that. Can you make it fit somehow, some way, and start somewhere? Ryan, I don't know if I can do all this. You don't have to do all that. Pick one. Start to build it. Start to grow it. Right? Choose to stop some things. Pick a thing to delight in and think about it a little bit. This is not just a time to numb out. Right? This is not Netflix binge. Right? Nothing wrong with watching. Nothing wrong with entertainment. There's room for that. There's places for that. This time is about stuff that's better than that, because it actually gives us refreshment, gives us rest at the deepest levels. Here's the next one: experiment. And you got to start somewhere. Got to start playing with it. What refreshes me? I don't even know. Never thought about it before. Try it. Maybe you try an activity or try a relationship and do some things on that day. And if you walk away praising God, refreshed, do it again. If you don't. There's freedom, guys. Here's the thing I want you to hear. There's freedom. This is for you. This is for you. And here's the question, though. If I did this, would that change my weeks? I'm going to argue it would. If you really want to think about it in a powerful way, what might this do to my decades? What's the cost of not doing this? If I run like this for 10 years, what do I look like a decade later? It ain't pretty. I'll just tell you that. It's not pretty. What might I look like if I ran like this for a decade? Might I know Jesus more? Might I have better relationships with the people I really care about? May my life be more filled with gratitude and awe. May I have some better general health emotionally, maybe even physically because of that. As I've got 4 kids, and we've been blundering and experimenting with this for 15 years. In and out of it, doing it more in some seasons and less in others. But if you're a young parent, hear me on this. It's one of the most, my kids are between 10 and 15. It's one of the most important decisions that we made as a young family, is to make a space in our lives where we could all be together for the vast majority of a day. And I can't even totally quantify for you what it has done. but it is built in interconnectedness. It is built a trust and an intimacy and a culture in our family that somehow has shown up today. And listen, we messed this up 1,000 ways. Please. I've done plenty of this. But this rhythm of working this in as much as we can is a game changer. I just had some parents stop me and say, Ryan, I wish we would have done this earlier. If you are in any stage, some version of this will help you. And here's my last encouragement, then we'll worship together. I just want to fight for this in our lives because I want to recognize that no one is going to make you do this. If you don't prioritize this and elevate this in your life and in your mind and in your heart to see it happen in your schedule, it will not happen. That time will get filled up. I just promise you that's how it is. So I'm asking you and advocating for you to fight for this in your own world, in your own life. Not because you're going to earn anything from God. Jesus took care of all that. Not because this is a law to be kept, and if you don't, people are going to hurt you. This is a gift given to you and I by God, who knows how we function and wants us not just to survive life, he wants us to thrive in it. So will I grab hold of that? Right. That's the question. And will I elevate it and make it match the level of priority that God puts on it? And here's at the end of the day, the heart. God just simply wants to be with us. That's it. Which is nuts. The people that were his enemies, me. He wants to be with me. He wants to be with us. I want to spend a day with you. That you might be able to carry me into the week and we could spend the week together. And as you're working with me. And as you're resting with me. As you're working with me. And that we live life together. That you might know my goodness and my grace. And you could live in rest in a real way through more and more and more of your life. That rest of soul could show up even as I'm working. That's what I want. That's what I want for you. That's what I believe God wants for all of us. The question is, will I move on it? Take hold of the gift, one of them, that God made and designed for me to enjoy. Guys, the band's going to come out. I'd love for you to pray and think this through. Think how it shows up in your world. Would you pray with me? Lord, I want to, again, say thank you for being such a good father. Lord, you know what's best for us. And this morning, Lord, we just confess that we don't. I don't. I think what's best is continuing to drive forward whatever it is I'm working on. And Lord, I'm learning to believe and to trust you when you tell me that it's better for me to sit down, to take a breath, to see awe again, to delight in you. And Lord, I pray for each and every person here that you would draw us into these little pockets and windows of rest. Lord, help us to find the resolve to work through the obstacles that we all have. They look different. Help us to hear the invitation. But Lord, really, it's your love, your reckless love fighting for our attention, for our calendar, for our hearts. That's really all you're after, Lord. You want us. Even though we have failed you, you continue to choose us. Help us to say yes to that again in a new way today. Meet us here, Lord, even now.